The wind cuts sharp across the ridges of Appalachia, carrying whispers older than the mountains themselves. Somewhere deep in the hollow, a house leans against the fog, its windows like eyes that have seen too much. This is Appalachia's darkest secret, a story stitched into the soil, spoken only in the hush of midnight. Footsteps on the creaking floorboards, a lantern swinging low, the faint scent of smoke, and something unnameable. You feel it before you see it. The silence that isn't empty, the weight of eyes that have watched generations grow and vanish. Somewhere behind the pines, a dog howls, echoing across the hills like a warning. Every shadow seems to twist, every breath feels borrowed. Tonight, the mountains aren't just quiet, they are waiting. If you linger long enough in these stories, you'll start to notice the quiet corners of Appalachia where the world seems to hold its breath. Trust me, what comes next stays with you. Like, share, and subscribe if you feel the pull of these hidden tales. And tell me, have you ever sensed a place watching you, waiting, holding its secrets close? Let's continue, because this story only gets stranger. The fog clings to the hollow like a living thing, rolling through the twisted oaks and spilling over the stone walls that mark forgotten graves. A cabin leans at the edge of Widow's Hollow, its timbers blackened and warped by decades of wind and rain. You can almost hear it sigh as the mountains shift. No path leads directly to it. Only a narrow track where the grass grows taller than your knees, hiding roots that could trip the unwary. The air tastes of damp earth and pine resin, sharp and biting against your teeth. Somewhere distant, a creek gurgles over stones worn smooth, but its voice is drowned by the groan of the old house settling in its own weight. The windows are dark, and yet, as your eyes adjust, it feels as though they're watching, reflecting every step with a quiet patience. Locals speak of the cabin only in whispers. Some say it belonged to a widow who vanished one winter night, leaving the hearth cold and the doors open to the wind. Others claim she was never alone, that someone or something stayed behind, unseen, waiting. The stories grow with each telling, like roots wrapping tighter around the hills. By night, the house appears to breathe with the fog, exhaling cold clouds that seep into your lungs, making each step heavier, more hesitant. The porch boards creak under your feet, yet you swear you hear another set of footsteps in rhythm with your own, just beyond the threshold. A lantern left on the windowsill flickers, as if breathing with a life of its own, casting shadows that twist and stretch across the walls. Somewhere above, a bat flits silently, unseen but sensed, brushing the edge of your awareness with a warning. And then there's the wind, whispering through the hollow, carrying voices not your own. Laughter, cries, something incomprehensible, fleeting, and yet undeniably there. As you step inside, the temperature drops abruptly, colder than any winter night in these mountains. The floorboards groan beneath your weight, echoing through rooms shrouded in dust and shadow. The smell of smoke and old wood lingers, mixed with something faintly metallic, like rust or dried blood. Each corner of the cabin seems to lean toward you, pressing closer as if the walls themselves are alive. You notice objects misplaced, a chair turned toward a window that looks onto nothing, a cracked mirror that doesn't quite reflect the room, only shapes you cannot name. In the kitchen, a kettle sits on the cold hearth, though no fire has touched it in decades. On the table, a single plate rests, a remnant of a meal long forgotten. Yet the air hums around it, charged with a presence you can't see but feel. The widow's story emerges in fragments. Neighbors remember candles flickering in the window long after she disappeared, the smell of stew wafting across the hollow in the dead of night, the sound of soft humming drifting over the ridge. And then, the vanishings begin. Travelers, hunters, a stray child or two, all drawn inexplicably toward the cabin. Each disappearance leaves behind only a whisper on the wind, a shadow at the edge of sight, a lingering chill in the air. In one room, a journal lies on the floor, yellowed with age. The pages are filled with cramped, looping handwriting, detailing events that never should have been seen by human eyes. Glimpses of figures in the trees, voices calling from beneath the floorboards, the widow's own descent into fear, desperation, and something darker, something that tethered her to the cabin even as the rest of the world moved on. Outside, the fog thickens, swallowing the hollow in gray and white. The mountains are quiet now, but not empty. You can feel the house watching, waiting, its story unfinished. Every step away from it echoes in the trees, and for a long moment, you wonder if you will ever truly leave Widow's Hollow behind, or if the hollow has claimed yet another witness. The pines grow dense here, older than memory, their trunks thick and knotted, needles whispering secrets to one another as the wind slips through. The forest floor is soft with moss and fallen needles, muffling your footsteps, but it does nothing to silence the noises that rise from the shadows. In the hollow between ridges, the sound of laughter drifts on the wind. A child's laughter, high-pitched, sweet, and gone before you can locate it. Locals speak of it cautiously, with the pause of someone afraid to finish their sentence. It ain't real, they say, yet their eyes dart toward the trees, toward the dark folds of the hills. Travelers who wander off the narrow trails often hear whispers, voices that speak your name or ask questions you can't answer. And if you strain to listen, you can almost hear the pines themselves joining in, swaying as though nodding to some unseen rhythm. The air tastes of damp wood, pine resin, and something older, decayed, something like soil turning back into shadow. Each gust carries it closer, curling around your ankles like smoke from a long-dead fire. Birds are absent here. Only the occasional creak of branches and the skitter of small animals break the silence. It is a quiet that isn't empty. It waits, anticipates, observes. And then you see it. Movement at the corner of your eye, subtle, fleeting. A child in a faded dress, standing between two trunks, smiling just long enough for you to feel your chest tighten, and then gone. The forest swallows them whole, and you're left blinking in disbelief, the cold seeping into your bones. Every story the locals tell begins here, in the pines. Whispers that slip into minds like fog, impossible to ignore once you've heard them. The further you move into the forest, the thicker the air becomes. Fog coils around trunks like smoke from an unseen fire. Shadows lengthen unnaturally, and the path beneath your feet disappears into moss and roots. You hear a voice clearly now, a question in the darkness. Why are you here? It is childlike, yet there is a depth to it, something ancient and knowing. The hairs along your neck rise, and the silence of the mountains presses down. Footsteps follow, but not your own. They are soft at first, hesitant, then deliberate, circling you with a rhythm that doesn't match your pace. A lantern appears far ahead, swinging low and erratic, illuminating the fog in sharp, narrow bands. You hesitate. The light lures you, almost beckoning, yet every instinct tells you to turn back. The stories warn of those who followed. They never returned, or if they did, they were changed. As you edge closer, the whispers grow urgent, layering over one another in a chorus of voices. Names, warnings, pleas, they fill the forest, the trees vibrating with the energy of unseen watchers. And then, faintly, the laughter returns. Multiple children now, echoing in patterns impossible to track. You stumble, heart hammering, tripping over roots that seem to shift beneath your feet. In the distance, a hilltop clearing opens, illuminated by a pale moon. Figures stand there, motionless. Children? Perhaps. Shadows? Certainly. And as the wind shifts, you hear them. The pines, the forest itself. A warning, a promise, a story in motion. One misstep, one glance the wrong way, and you are part of it. A whisper in the trees, a laugh fading with the wind. The hollow exhales, drawing fog down into the valleys. You glance back toward the path you came, and it has disappeared, replaced by endless trunks and the watchful dark. The pines sway gently, almost mockingly, hiding secrets older than the first settlers. And in that quiet, you understand. Some stories are meant to be heard, but not understood, their whispers lingering long after you've left the woods behind. The church sits at the edge of a ridge, forgotten by maps and time alike. Its steeple tilts as if bowing under the weight of decades, the wooden shingles blackened and curling. Fog rolls down the hill in thick waves, swallowing the path before it reaches the weathered doors. On certain nights, the locals whisper, lights glow behind the shattered windows, flickering like lanterns guiding someone or something unseen. This is where Appalachia's darkest secret refuses to stay buried. Inside, the air is thick with dust and candle smoke, clinging to the rafters like ancient spiderwebs. The pews are broken, splintered edges cutting at bare feet. The floorboards groan under the weight of memories rather than bodies, and the pulpit tilts forward as if straining to speak truths long silenced. Somewhere in the shadows, a hymn is hummed softly, not by a human, but by the lingering presence of devotion turned to fear. Stories circulate of midnight gatherings, a congregation that should not exist, veiled in secrecy. People speak of figures dressed in faded Sunday best, kneeling or swaying as though caught between worlds, their faces obscured by candlelight. The air vibrates with whispers, promises, confessions, cries, each word swallowed almost immediately by the thick walls. No outsider has ever stayed to witness the entire service. Those who claim to have peeked through broken windows describe a surreal, almost hypnotic ceremony, leaving them unable to speak, their minds refusing to hold what they saw. Outside, the wind presses against the church like an invisible hand. Pines sway with unnatural rhythm, their branches scraping the roof. The night is alive with sounds, distant dogs baying, owls hooting, and the soft shuffle of unseen feet on the dirt outside. The congregation is patient. It waits for anyone foolish enough to trespass, for the hollow to offer another story to those who dare approach after dark. Some nights, the hymn crescendos into something entirely unrecognizable, a chorus of voices layered in eerie harmony, as though the mountain itself had learned to sing. The candle flames bend toward the ceiling as if bowing to some unseen force, and shadows grow longer, stretching and entwining in impossible angles. Occasionally, a voice breaks the collective chant, higher, sharper, echoing through the hollow, a warning or perhaps an invitation. The locals tell of a boy, not more than 10, who wandered near the church one foggy night. His lantern dimmed halfway up the ridge, and when his mother came searching hours later, she found only his footprints circling the building in precise patterns, ending abruptly at the threshold. The boy never returned, and the church remained undisturbed for weeks, as if respecting the hollow's unspoken rules. Some say the figures inside noticed him, that he was marked, and the mountain whispered its verdict. Inside, the walls pulse with quiet power. A journal discovered years later in a nearby cabin describes a preacher who vanished decades ago, leaving behind sermons filled with cryptic warnings. His final entry hints at knowledge gained in the shadows of midnight, something alive beneath the floorboards, something patient and enduring. The congregation, it seems, continued without him, guided by some unseen hand, a ritual older than any living witness. Even those brave enough to stay away feel it. The air carries the faint scent of beeswax and decay, the distant echo of footsteps that do not belong to any living being. The ridge itself seems to lean inward, urging trespassers closer, testing their resolve. And if you linger too long, the hollow will claim your attention, bending your perception until the boundary between observer and congregation dissolves. As the fog rolls thick over the ridge, the church vanishes almost entirely, leaving only the impression of structure and shadow. The midnight congregation exists in whispers and memory, a reminder that in Appalachia, some faiths are never forgotten, and some rituals are never meant for human understanding. The mountains keep their secrets well, and the church is only one of the places where those secrets gather, waiting. The ridge trail disappears beneath a heavy curtain of mist, each step uncertain, swallowed by a gray haze that clings to boots and knees. Lanterns drift in the distance, swinging erratically, their light pale and wavering like the heartbeat of the mountains themselves. No one knows who carries them, or why they appear only on certain nights when the fog is thick enough to hide every path, but reveal the shapes in the dark. Hikers and hunters speak of seeing them out of the corner of their eyes, lights bobbing between trees, vanishing when looked at directly, reappearing further down the trail. The air is thick with the scent of wet leaves and moss, and something else iron, copper, old smoke, a smell that makes the skin crawl. Footsteps echo unnaturally, not always matching the rhythm of your own. Sometimes a voice calls softly, almost a whisper, urging, teasing. The trail seems to stretch endlessly, folding back on itself, as if the mountains themselves are rearranging paths. You catch glimpses of figures, a lantern bearer, small and hunched, or tall and silent, moving with impossible grace. Locals tell tales of those who followed the lights, drawn by curiosity or perhaps an unseen hand. Some returned hours later, wandering the roads in a daze, eyes wide, mouths dry, unable to recount the journey accurately. Others vanished entirely, leaving only the faint echo of lanterns bobbing away in the mist. The mountains do not chase them. The mist does not hide them. They simply become part of the hollow, woven into its fog-soaked story. There is a quiet dread in following the lights. Each step is a negotiation with the unknown. Trees loom like silent sentinels, shadows stretching unnaturally, branches brushing against shoulders, faces, as if testing the courage of those who dare the ridge. Even the wind seems to twist in rhythm with the lanterns, whispering words too faint to catch, promising things that should not be sought. On one ridge, a hiker's journal was found, its pages damp, ink smeared. It tells of following a lone lantern into the mist, of stepping over roots and rocks that seemed to shift underfoot. The lantern led to a small clearing where shadows danced without wind, figures moving in and out of view. And then the lantern stopped, hovering in midair, light pulsing softly, as if breathing. At that moment, the hiker noticed the fog thickening unnaturally, almost solid, curling around legs, coiling upward like smoke from a buried fire. The hiker turned, only to see another lantern emerging from the opposite side, moving toward them. A faint, childlike giggle echoed through the mist, soft and impossibly near. The air tasted of cold metal and damp earth, making each breath sharp and reluctant. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet every sense of direction was stripped away. The clearing shifted subtly. The moss underfoot seemed to rearrange itself, elongating paths, hiding exits, enclosing the space in a living maze. Some who follow the lanterns report seeing faces, pale, hollow-eyed, staring silently from the shadows. Not threatening, but impossibly distant, as if observing from another time. Others describe hearing whispers, fragments of conversations long past, voices that should not be present. And when the lanterns finally vanish, as they always do, the hiker is left alone, the fog settling like a suffocating blanket, heart hammering, and the trail behind erased as though it never existed. The ridge holds its secrets jealously. The mist is patient, bending paths, hiding witnesses, and testing curiosity. Each lantern is a lure, a memory, a story stitched into the hollow, waiting for the next person to wander into its grasp. The mountains do not forgive curiosity. They transform it into experience, a brush with the unknown, leaving behind a tale whispered from ridge to ridge, a warning that the lights in the mist are not just illusions, but part of something far older, something patient, something that remembers every soul that dared follow. Deep in a hidden hollow, far from any road, a family lives whose name is rarely spoken outside the valley. Their house sits squat against the mountainside, dark timbers streaked with moss, windows blacked with grime. Children playing nearby are warned to stay away. Even the dogs whimper when passing too close. The locals call them the family that shouldn't be, a warning passed down like a curse, yet no one can explain exactly why. The stories themselves are fragmented, pieced together from hushed recollections, each one more unsettling than the last. The air around their home smells of wood smoke and damp earth, mixed with a faint metallic tang, like copper or rust. At night, shadows move behind windows where no candle burns. Sometimes a faint lullaby drifts across the valley, sweet and soft, then twisting into something unrecognizable, almost sinister. Travelers report glimpses of figures, children with hollow eyes, adults who appear far older than they should, moving through rooms in patterns that make no sense. Locals avoid the family, crossing the road or taking longer paths through the hollow. It is said that anyone who enters the yard becomes entangled in their presence, caught in a web of gazes and whispers. Even curiosity is dangerous here. Some say the family can see your intentions before you act, a knowing born from generations hidden in the shadow of the mountains. The story begins decades ago. A woman vanished from a neighboring hollow, returning months later with children whose fathers were unknown, her husband dead or forgotten. Over time, the children grew, strange and uncanny, capable of feats that the hollow itself seemed to facilitate sudden disappearances, knowing words before spoken, shadows that moved with thought rather than wind. Each generation deepened the mystery, creating a family that the mountains themselves seemed to guard, as if protecting a secret too dark to be revealed. One autumn night, a hunter strayed too close. He saw them gathered on the porch, the family lined like statues, their faces motionless yet aware. One child stepped forward, eyes pale in the moonlight, and spoke the hunter's name, a name he hadn't spoken aloud in years. The air tightened, the forest pressing in around him. Fear rooted him in place as the wind carried whispers of warnings he didn't understand. He ran, tripping over roots, feeling the unseen eyes trailing him. And when he looked back, the house was dark, the figures gone, as if swallowed by the mountains. The family's reputation grows with each tale. Neighbors waking to see a child staring silently through the window, hearing voices in the woods that mimic loved ones' calls, travelers disappearing after approaching the yard. Even those who claim no encounter feel the weight of their presence. The hollow itself seems warped around the house, paths bending subtly, fog lingering longer, wind shifting oddly, the environment obeying a will older than anyone alive. In the evening, the smoke from the chimney carries stories of meals cooked and rituals observed. Candles flicker inside, illuminating the figures in brief, distorted glimpses. Their laughter, too sweet and too high-pitched, drifts across the valley, accompanied by sighs or low murmurs that chill the blood. And if you listen closely, the forest itself seems to join in, a soft susurrus of voices, footsteps, and something else, something patient, watching, waiting for the next soul to wander too near. Some locals claim the family knows the secrets of the mountains, of the hollows and ridges, of the vanished and forgotten. They speak in tones of dread and awe, as if acknowledging that some beings, some people, were never meant to be touched by ordinary life. The family that shouldn't be is one such entity, not entirely human, not entirely explained, and yet wholly intertwined with the hollow. Even from a distance, the hollow seems alive, echoing with the unseen footsteps of the family, the whispers of generations, and the ever-present knowledge that the mountains have eyes, and they never forget. Those who witness them, even briefly, carry the memory forever, a warning etched into the marrow, a reminder that curiosity can bring one too close to what should remain hidden. The mine lies abandoned at the base of a craggy ridge, its entrance a yawning black mouth into the mountain. Rusted tracks lead inward, half buried by debris and decades of neglect. The air is damp, thick with the scent of earth, decay, and a faint chemical tang that stings the nostrils. Even on the brightest day, shadows cling to the tunnel mouths, as if reluctant to release the darkness within. Locals avoid it, telling stories of miners who disappeared, screams echoing from the shafts long after the last pickaxe fell silent. The first thing you notice when approaching is the quiet, the way the wind stops abruptly at the mine's edge, leaving the air unnaturally still. Step closer, and faint sounds reach you. The distant drip of water, the groan of old beams, whispers almost indistinguishable from the wind. Some say the mountain itself remembers every footfall, every voice, every misstep. Lantern light inside flickers and bends strangely, revealing passages that weren't visible moments before, as if the mind shifts with memory, reshaping itself around intruders. A journal discovered near the entrance tells of a collapse decades ago, trapping a group of miners underground. When the rescue teams arrived, nothing remained. Not bodies, not tools, not the rubble. Only a faint scratching on the walls, resembling desperate claw marks, and a lingering sense that the mountain had devoured something more than flesh. From that night forward, locals report hearing footsteps echoing from deep within, long after sunset, voices calling for help that never came, and shadows moving where no light should reach. The forest surrounding the mine is unnaturally silent, as if life itself hesitates near the hollow. Birds avoid the trees, wind moves in hesitant gusts, and the occasional deer or fox will stop, ears high, staring at nothing before bolting. The hollow carries a weight, an oppressive awareness that penetrates your thoughts. And if you enter the mine, even briefly, the shadows seem to stretch behind you, not following, but waiting. Inside, the air grows colder and heavier with each step. Lanterns swing on chains, or sometimes hang inexplicably from beams that have long since rotted. The walls glisten with damp, and the faint scent of iron grows stronger, almost metallic, as if blood has seeped into the stone itself. Footsteps echo unevenly, duplicating themselves or vanishing entirely, leaving you questioning whether you are truly alone. Somewhere below, a faint tapping begins, rhythmic, deliberate, like a message in Morse code from an unknown source. Stories tell of explorers who followed the tapping deeper into the mine, compelled by curiosity or madness. One man described reaching a tunnel where the walls seemed to pulse, as though breathing. Shapes moved just beyond the light, always retreating, teasing with glimpses of pale skin or tattered clothing. The further he went, the louder the scratching became, until it overlapped with whispers in languages unknown, voices urgent and pleading. When he turned back, the path had changed, tunnels collapsing or stretching impossibly, leaving him wandering for hours or perhaps days until finally emerging, hollow-eyed and unrecognizable. Some claim the mine holds the souls of those lost, trapped between stone and air, forever replaying the moment they vanished. Others insist the mountain guards its own, absorbing trespassers into the labyrinth, feeding on curiosity and fear alike. The lanterns that appear near the entrance at night are said to be lures, remnants of the miners' last attempts to escape, drawing the living toward the same fate. Outside, fog rolls across the ridge, heavy and clinging, erasing trails and paths. The mine yawns silently, patient as ever, shadows pooling at its mouth. Even the wind seems hesitant, avoiding the hollow, carrying only faint whispers, the scratch of pickaxes, muffled cries, and the echo of footsteps that never truly stop. And somewhere deep within, the mountain waits, remembering each soul that dared enter, each secret it was forced to keep, each story that will never leave the hollow untouched. In a valley where fog lingers even on the brightest mornings, children are sometimes seen playing in the shadows, pale figures that vanish when approached. Locals call them the Hollow Children. Their laughter drifts across the hills like wind through chimes, faint, hollow, impossible to locate. No one knows where they come from or where they go, yet everyone senses their presence. Some say they are lost souls, tethered to the mountains by secrets too dark to name. Others insist they are born of the hollow itself, children of the fog and shadow. The terrain here is treacherous, steep ridges and twisted roots hiding every misstep. Yet the hollow children move effortlessly, gliding across moss and stone as though gravity bends for them. Travelers report glimpses of them in the corner of the eye, small hands waving, eyes wide and pale, smiles that vanish with a blink. The air around them is cooler, heavier, smelling faintly of wet soil and pine, mixed with something indefinably metallic, a warning of the unnatural. Stories tell of hikers who paused to watch them, unable to resist the sound of laughter. They saw children forming patterns, walking in circles or lining the ridges like sentinels. Each step seemed synchronized with the hills themselves, and the forests seemed to bend, guiding observers into paths they hadn't intended to take. When the hikers turned back, the hollow children were gone, leaving only footprints that faded as if the fog itself had swallowed them. Locals speak cautiously, their voices dropping to whispers. Don't follow the laughter, they warn. It ain't play, it's waiting. And the hollow seems to agree, the wind pressing against travelers' faces, urging them to leave, bending branches toward or away, as if controlling the very route. The children, though silent, carry an awareness older than any living witness, a knowing that chills to the bone. At night, the valley changes. Fog thickens, curling between trees and rocks like smoke. Lanterns from distant cabins offer little comfort, dim against the dense gray. The hollow children appear more frequently, silhouettes flickering between trunks, their small forms almost too fast to track. The air carries whispers, names spoken softly, questions half-formed, laughter that turns to sighs in an instant. Those who linger too long often report a sensation of being watched, followed, guided by an unseen hand. One story tells of a family camping near the ridge. Their fire burned low, embers crackling, casting shadows that danced against the trunks. The children first appeared at the tree-line, standing silently, eyes reflecting firelight. The family called to them, waving, but the hollow children didn't respond, only beckoned with subtle motions, leading the adults further into the fog. Panic set in as the mist thickened and the forest seemed to shift, paths twisting unnaturally. They fled, stumbling over roots, branches scratching their faces, until finally, the ridge opened and the figures vanished. No one was harmed, but the memory lingered like a brand, a warning that curiosity draws attention in the hollow. Other tales speak of fleeting touches, hands brushing an ankle, a pat on the shoulder, a whisper in a voice you know yet cannot place. Those who feel it are forever aware of the children's presence, even miles away. The hollow seems to retain these memories, bending light and sound to replay the story for new wanderers, ensuring the mountain's secrets remain alive. The hollow children are more than sightings. They are an experience, a test, a warning. Their presence reminds all who enter these valleys that the mountains are patient, watching, waiting for the next curious soul. They move like living shadows, and when the fog rolls thick over the ridges, you understand. Some play in Appalachia is never innocent, and some children are never meant to grow up beyond the hollow. The ridge stretches like a spine across the mountains, jagged and unforgiving. Shadows cling to its peaks, pooling in hollows where fog cannot reach. Night falls unevenly here, as if the sky itself hesitates, letting darkness stretch thin before thickening suddenly. The wind whistles through pine needles, carrying whispers from one hollow to another. Somewhere beyond the ridge, faint lanterns flicker in rhythm with unseen footsteps. Each shadow seems alive, breathing, watching, holding its own memory of every story that has unfolded here. The forest beneath the ridge is a patchwork of darkness and mist. Every tree is a sentinel, roots clutching the earth as if anchoring the secrets below. The hollow children sometimes appear here, their pale eyes glowing in brief glimpses through the fog. The widow's cabin, the abandoned church, the family hidden in the valley, all of it seems to converge upon this ridge. The mountains themselves pulse, as if aware, as if orchestrating the final act of a story that has been unfolding for decades. Travelers speak of the ridge as though it were alive, bending paths, shifting rocks, hiding and revealing. Mist snakes between rocks like spectral fingers. Shapes flicker at the corner of the eye, sometimes human, sometimes not. The wind carries a faint metallic tang, like the memory of blood and iron, mingled with damp earth. And sometimes, if you listen closely, you hear a chorus of whispers, fragments of the hollow children's laughter, the widow's lament, a preacher's hymn, all layered together in a sound that should not exist outside the ridge. The air is thick, almost viscous, pressing against lungs with every inhale. Lanterns appear intermittently, bobbing along paths that were invisible moments before. Observers feel compelled to follow them, drawn by curiosity or a force beyond understanding. The ridge does not forgive curiosity. Each step forward deepens the mountain's memory of you, ensuring that your presence is recorded, remembered, and perhaps shared with the shadows that dwell in hollows unseen. At the ridge's highest point, the fog clears briefly, revealing the skeletal remains of old cabins, rusted tools, and paths long forgotten. Here, the stories converge. The widow, the family, the hollow children, and the midnight congregation, their whispers mingle in the wind. Shapes flicker in and out, and the ridge seems to breathe as one entity, alive with memories of the lost, the vanished, and the frightened. Each step feels heavier, more deliberate, the mountain testing resolve, patience, and fear. Some who have reached the summit speak of a presence, not malevolent, but insistent, aware, almost sentient. Lanterns move along the ridge without human touch, shadows stretch in impossible directions, and the fog thickens into walls of white that disorient even the most experienced hikers. Sounds layer unnaturally. Footsteps, laughter, whispers, and the faint groan of wood and stone settling, as if the ridge itself were alive, digesting every visitor. A journal found on the ridge recounts a hunter who ventured here decades ago. He described shadows that moved with purpose, shapes that mirrored his own, and a sudden sensation of being observed from all directions at once. The hollow children appeared, leading him along paths that seemed to rearrange themselves with each step. At the final clearing, he saw the widow's cabin, the abandoned church, and a figure resembling the long-lost preacher, all appearing to coexist in the same space, layered in a reality that defied explanation. He fled, but the memory stayed, etched into his mind like the ridge itself had claimed a piece of him. The ridge holds more than just physical space. It contains stories, memories, warnings. Lanterns, shadows, and whispers are the ridge's language, speaking to those who dare approach. Even leaving the area does not erase the impression the mountains remember. And as fog descends once more, swallowing paths and peaks, the ridge becomes quiet again, patient and watchful, holding its secrets until the next soul wanders too close. The shadows are always there, stretching over the ridge, waiting, and the mountains will never forget. The mountains remember every whisper, every shadow, and every soul that dared wander too close. Appalachia's secrets linger, patient and unyielding, hidden in fog, forest, and hollow. And as you leave, one question remains. Did you truly escape, or did the ridge claim a piece of you?